That's something that is very marketable, because the same protection that was purchased when the original loan portfolio was developed is available for second, third, and fourth subsequent purchasers. And in the U.S., it's not uncommon for a mortgage to be sold 2, 3, or 4 or 5 times. In fact, if you talk to many of your American colleagues overseas, ask them, when they buy a house, sometimes within 30 days they get a notice that the loan was sold. And sometimes it's timing. And you'll talk to some people that their loan was sold 3 or 4 times. And you get a notice from a new lender that says, we're now in charge of your mortgage, please remit your payments to us. And what that did is that made the cost of borrowing money, what it cost you to borrow the money, much cheaper. Because now banks no longer dealt with the risk associated with the real estate. What they dealt with at that time was real estate creditworthiness. Now all they deal with is the creditworthiness of the individual. So that's an element of the risk that they've removed from their underwriting. And initially, when title insurance began, there was a huge amount of resistance from the bar. Attorneys looked at it as a method of taking away their business. But now, especially in commercial transactions, it's considered malpractice by an attorney to not recommend title insurance to a client. Or if a client says, I don't really think I need it, to say, no, you're wrong, I think you really need to have it. One of the downsides of our system, as you mentioned earlier, is that we've got a conveyance system. It's not a registry system, and everything is local. Deeds are not prepared by solicitors or notaries. Deeds are prepared by anyone who can write. And anyone can be a notary who pays the $90 fee. So you have fraud as an issue. You have mistakes in the legal description. So from that is what you need protection. Generally, the types of claims that we suffer more in the United States are mechanics liens in the commercial area. When I tell people outside the United States about what the mechanics lien, they just think that's incredible. And for those of you who may not know, a mechanics lien is a lien placed on a real estate by somebody who has done work for the benefit of the real estate. And when times are bad and the construction industry is hurting, the mechanics liens rise because, of course, the general contractors haven't paid the subcontractors. So it's not only the general contractor who can put the lien on the property, but it's anybody who provides materials, work, or labor. And that's why an industry that grew out of that is the construction escrow business. So that all the money is paid into escrow, and as the developer does the work, he then gets a receipt. We just purchased a house recently, and it was interesting. We purchased it from an individual who builds a house once a year. And when it came time to close, the title company didn't want to close because he didn't show proof of what he spent. So they took $25,000 of the proceeds and put it in escrow until he can prove whatever he spent. Because why? The title company is issuing a title policy. And if they let that slide, it's an American expression, you let it slide, then they're looking at a claim possibly from some plumbers or some people who provide the sod. So that's an area of the industry that's really supported in conjunction with the title industry. Now, what's different about title as opposed to the other types of insurance is that anything that has happened has already happened. It just does not manifest itself until later. Property casualty, you are insuring from risk of future loss. And I often think that the term title insurance is a bad term to use because we get lumped in to the other areas. And when you look at title insurance legislation, the UK and the United States are really the only two countries that I'm aware of right now that have title insurance legislation specific to title. Any other country lumps us up in the general insurance category. And I've even had lawyers tell me, well, you shouldn't use title insurance, you should use something else. In Costa Rica, we use the term title guarantee as opposed to a title policy. Dominican Republic, we use the term title guarantee. They're all, it's a question of semantics of what you say, but in actuality, what we do is guarantee, well, we don't even guarantee the title. All we guarantee is that if anybody comes on the block, we're going to pay to defend you and we're going to pay the claim. Even we cannot guarantee title. So I mean, that's basically how it developed in the U.S. And so what our challenge is, and I lump all the title companies in this, is try to go to a mindset where people say, well, this is how we've done business for 1,000 years and we've never needed it. And what I tell people is, it's going to sneak up on you. And before you know it, it's going to be there. And it's going to function. The United States is a classic example of how the title policy has made the secondary mortgage market flourish. As I indicated in my bio, I've been doing transactional work in Latin America for a number of years. And where you could get an interest rate of 7%, let's say in the United States, in Latin America, 20 to 30%. So the cost of borrowing the money is expensive, which meant that people in Latin America had to do more creative things in order to build. And what they would do is if you were buying a simple $100,000 condo, you pay 30% down. And then the developer would use that 30% to build. And then you would have a 7-year mortgage on that. Maybe paying $1,000 a month or whatever it is to pay the balance off. But the developer, the cost of the money for the developer was too expensive for him to borrow from the bank. When you have those rates and you have that inflation, it makes the cost. But when you can borrow money at 6%, sometimes 5%, depending on the status of your credit, it makes borrowing that money much more palatable. You can borrow more of it, more people can borrow, and now you've got a flowing economy with mortgages flowing all over the place, and then people lumping these portfolios together. I often wonder, how do people think of this stuff? Do people sit in a room and they think, oh gee, yeah, we're going to work with mortgage-backed securities? It develops because there is a void in the process somewhere. Hello? There is a void in the process somewhere which the title companies have tried to fill the need. And that's not just with title, it's with any area of the industry. You fill that void by providing a product or service. Something that I get, and chime in with me if you get this. First of all, I get, well, you don't insure anything because if there's a risk, you're not going to insure it. Well, that's not true. We do take unknown risk. And we have our actuaries on both sides of the fence there. We say these adverse possession, what's the likelihood of adverse possession here? Everything is on a case-by-case basis, but we have data to really justify how we would charge the premium. You don't cover it, so what am I paying for? Second thing I get is the Crown guarantees the title. But if you look more closely at what they guarantee, you have to go through an administrative procedure to collect if there is a collection process.
The biggest difference there actually is that the state guarantees the title, but only if you suffer loss. So they won't pay to defend you if someone tries to challenge your position.
Exactly, that's a
pay for your own defence, and if you win, they're not going to give you anything because you won. Whereas the insurer is going to pay for and manage that defence fund.
Well,
that's the biggest single thing.
Exactly. And so the same issue with attorneys. They will say, well, we have malpractice insurance that will cover this. However, in a number of jurisdictions, you really are paying for a title policy because part of the notar's fee is really allocated towards a portion of his malpractice insurance. And there, you are really going up against a company that has a vested interest in making sure they don't pay, because they owe no obligation to you as a property buyer or as a lender. They owe an obligation to the insured and not pay. So what do you have to do now? You have to start a process, and there could be a mistake, and yet the lawyer or the solicitor not be negligent. And if that's the case, another American expression is you're left holding the bag. We cover under a contract basis, so negligence is not a factor. What is a factor is that there is a claim. And if it falls within the guidelines, we, the title insurance industry, will start day one defense. Now, every once in a while we have disputes on coverage issues, but at the very least,